Cape Town is it's been called the mother city of South Africa because it was the first colonial settlement and still has such an important role in the country, though the capital is in Pretoria and the largest city is Johannesburg, which someone described Johannesburg as a combination of Sodom and Gomorrah with Las Vegas. And so it's a big booming city in the interior, but nothing matches Cape Town for just its scenery and its distinctive qualities. I'll just give you a brief overview of some of that. Now, we've already been there, some of us have been many times, but again, like everywhere else you've traveled, there's always something new to see and somebody new to meet. And so the great characteristic of Cape Town, though, is, of course, the great mountain range that sits right above the city, Table Mountain, and the view that you can all have. If you haven't been there, that's one of the great things to do, take the cable car up. But as we've heard, especially from Rob, on the wild coast coming down from Durban down to East Cape, and then we come to these ragged points of the headlands of the Cape of Good Hope. The actual cape is this peninsula right here, though the most southern point is the Cape Agulhas out there in the rough ocean, which I showed yesterday. And so you can imagine what it was like for sailors and guests such as they were, like poor Bessie, who would see a coast like this and say, we hope to continue on and never have to encounter the kind of troubles that others came to come and discover this land. And so, I mean, particularly Rob has shown you the dramatic history of the arrival of the Portuguese in 1482 and the setup of the trading stations by the Portuguese all the way around up to India, all the way to finally to Macau and Nagasaki, where they would put up this pedrada, the great stone cross that would mark their arrival, though they did not have enough people to settle and colonize. They were purely military and traders, the Portuguese. The saying in Portugal is, we have a small country to come from, but a great world to die in. And so many an intrepid sailor came off, and their sight of Table Mountain and what became Cape Town was a remarkable vision after particularly coming all the way down the coast of Africa either way and coming to this place which has such the dramatic scenery. It's only matched in the world by maybe Rio de Janeiro and a few other craggy mountain shores, but this was not an uninhabitable land. It actually had lush interior. The mountain valleys that open up around this particular mountain range are particularly green and productive. And they were also occupied by the Khoisan people who came and greeted the first Portuguese and then later the Dutch. But they, like Rob was describing of the East Cape people, they were cattle herders and settled people. They may have had conflicts with their other peoples near them, but they were initially welcoming, and then the Dutch came and claimed it as their own and had good relations until they would say they own the land. Now this is like in the Americas. The Europeans came and gave gifts and exchanges, and then they would sign a title that now this is our land. And so this was something that was inexplicable to a lot of the indigenous people around the world, facing the kind of sense of property and ownership and exclusion that was brought as an import. Well, this town of Cape Town became so important because ships were coming around to go to India and Asia, and so there was regular trade, just like we can see out our suites now, coming around and then stopping at Cape Town as a place for relief and water and a little shore leave. And so it was called the world's tavern. All the ships from the world would come eventually to Cape Town and enjoy themselves, let's say. So the Dutch Overseas VOC Trading Company set up this company town with a fortified fort, which is still in right downtown area. That's the herald and mark of the town of Cape Town, but curiously it doesn't have any armaments. It has a welcoming woman and then some sort of a African lion, but it was strictly commercial. It was not meant to be a conquering empire on its own, but the settlers came and started, as you've heard, going over the valleys and setting up farms and a lush, productive small community. But again, because of the trade wars between the European powers and other economic factors, Cape Town was then a prize that was taken by the British in 1806. This was mainly to prevent the French, or the enemies of Britain, from having this key town at the tip of Africa. So the Cape Colony stretched all the way to what's now the East Cape over here, and up to North Cape is the current province of South Africa. This became the center of the British presence in South Africa. And as you've heard in detail, the original Dutch settlers did not want to be under the British rule, and they started their great trek and went into the interior, finally set up their own independent Transvaal and other free states, Orange Free State, up in the Central Highlands away from British control. But of course they had the problem of this land was already known and settled by the many peoples that were all through this large land. And so many a war was fought. You've heard about this. Particularly the British Army came in to try to suppress the Zulu, which was never quite finished. And then the Boer War with the Afrikaners resisting again. And so this is a land that has been soaked in blood and bitterness, even though it's been generous and able to support all kinds of people. And so this was at a certain point. The Cape Colony was, of course, with its capital, Cape Town, and then the other states and the other regions. And of course, the British Empire was going to stretch all the way to Egypt. Well, this island, you may get to go visit it off of Cape Town, became a military encampment and also then later a prison, and famously Mandela spent many years there. But as you come into the city, you can see the fantastic mountain range that is Cape Town, Table Mountain. The harbor actually curls around, so we are coming in from the north to the harbor. So sometimes when we sailed in the other time, I said, well, why is the sun setting over there? And I had took out my compass and it was completely mixed up by the ship, but it's a very snug and safe harbor that way, because whenever there's a big storm coming from the Southern Ocean, it may batter the mountains, but the city harbor in particular is very calm and tranquil, and the weather is generally dramatically but very pleasant. And so here we are coming into the harbor, and then you've been there, the Victoria and Albert harbor at the center, which has been rebuilt and developed as a major tourist attraction. And so we are, of course, there at the cruise terminal now. We've all been there before, but you can see that we are over at the cruise terminal, right over here, depending which berth, but you can walk across the bridge and into the old part of the harbor where there are a lot of restaurants and bars and shops and such. So this has really been a very big attraction for international travelers now, just because it was in the state of some dereliction as an industrial port. They built new container ports outside, so this has all been turned over to the pleasures of our visit here. And they keep adding more buildings to develop this center for the city. But if you go back on the outside of it, you see the old the tower that would have the time ball. And this was, if you know the tradition, on the Thames at Greenwich, the chronometer would say it's noon here, and all the ships would time their chronometers by the drop of the ball. Now, they don't do this anymore. We happen to have watches and things like that now. But that's a remnant of the nautical past where you'd coordinate your time at sea by that. And then there was the tower overlooking the actual harbor, the customs house, and some of the traditional buildings which have been very well maintained. This one, if you haven't been in it, is the old customs building over a new bridge that crosses the harbor front, but it's been turned into the African Art Center, the trading post, which has quite a display outside. But if you still have room in your baggage for a few souvenirs, there's this place is just packed from floor to ceiling and up 3 flights of stairs, and it's kind of an eyeful to go in and see. It collects things from all over Africa, so it's not just the region here. It's many, many things from all around Africa. of which the exuberance and the design and all that is legendary. And then these are the old warehouses that have been refitted as hotels and restaurants and such. So it's a pretty lively waterfront, including a Ferris wheel if you're so inclined. But above all, people come there to perform, dance groups, jugglers, concerts, and so this is the center for a lot of the nightlife. Cape Town has a lot of other areas and neighborhoods and suburbs, but a lot of the action for our visit is right here because we can be on the ship, go over, have lunch, come back and such. But it's a model of, let's say, the blending of history and then the attractions for today to go see. This is a new statue of Mandela that was put there. And this was a very much a working harbor, though. This is one of the old dry docks that they kept as just part of the scenery. But you can see the cranes and such, new construction. A lot of the housing is now luxury condos and hotels and studios. And so this is quite a bit far away from the other parts of town. But it has been, let's say, gussied up quite a bit and has a lot of new features. Every year I come, there's something new. Particularly the skyline keeps growing. So you have a city of over 1 million in the central business area on the sides of the mountains here, and then a vast suburbs and development elsewhere. Some of these glass boxes are a bit of an eyesore, but they still have some of the classic colonial buildings, the city hall and war memorials and such. So there's a big plaza up from the V&A harbor that is within walking distance with the city hall and other Victorian confections. Some of the old buildings have been turned into hotels and things, and the business has moved up into the high rises. But you have remnants of the colonial Dutch neighborhoods. You have an area called Bokap, which was where the Muslim population, the Malay, would live. And those are famous for their colorful houses. A lot of it has been bought out as, let's say, fixed up in recent years. So it's become a walking tour through the neighborhood, though. The prices in Cape Town are actually driving out a lot of the older families who can't afford the resistance of selling their property. Here's one of the mosques in Bokap. And it's also a town that's very energetic, particularly in sports and art. And if you've seen it before, this is the fantastic stadium, which is designed like the Zulu woman's big hat, big bonnet. And so it hosts a lot of international sports events and film festivals and different things. So then right up from the V&A harbor, there's the former district, which was the silage for the export of grain, took one of the great towers and converted it to the MOCAA, the Museum of Contemporary African Art. And so this is under the sponsorship of Zeit, family of Cape Town. But they took the building, and an architect named Thomas Heatherwick designed an interior as the museum. And then you can see sort of little glass windows here. Some of them are residential above this tremendous building. And when I first came here, this was a dusty harbor with freight ships and big trucks going around, and now it's become part of the, let's say, pedestrian zone of the V&A harbor as you walk toward the center city. And they kept the old hoppers for the grain and such, but the interior was carved out and made into this cathedral-like space going up 6-8 floors up, and then they have a roof garden up on top. But it's quite a fantastic piece of construction because every one of those scooped out parts were once filled with wheat, corn, whatever it may have been. But for the price of maybe 10 pounds or so, you can go in and go to the galleries, take the elevators up to the top, and then walk down through the different galleries. And I believe I have, well, there may be the movie that I thought I had. No? Well, I'll just continue on because you can take the kind of sweeping elevator up and see, but in the galleries itself, the raw bones of the silo building are still there. And then this is a piece of sculpture made out of the different pieces of earth brought from parts of South Africa to make it in a column sort of parallel to the structure of the building. And then there are more traditional gallery spaces, but they all feature African contemporary artists, which is an eyeful. And I would recommend going there. It's many a surprise in that museum. Well, Greater Cape Town has many neighborhoods stretching out around False Bay, and many groups, as you heard from Rob and others, the languages of South Africa. There are 11 official ones and many subgroups, but even in Cape Town you have the English speakers, the Afrikaans speakers, the Xhosa, which is the larger group in the Western Cape, and then many people from around the rest of South Africa, and now many immigrants from other parts of Africa have filled up Cape Town. Just as sort of the center becomes an international capital on its own, the outlying areas have become settlement for many refugees from other parts of Africa in particular, or South Africans coming looking for work. And we've heard this, even Zelda came to Cape Town to get a job. Little did she know what kind of a job it would turn into. But many people live in these kind of conditions, and it's been a struggle to keep up with the growing population to provide enough housing. And so this is the condition that many people either come from or come to and then hope to get out of. So this is the challenge of the government now, is how do you provide for ever more people? And again, the trouble of illegal immigration is, someone said that's the only thing that unites the nation of South Africa, is they don't want all these immigrants from everywhere. Present company excluded here. They like visitors, but the problem is that they end up with people who don't speak any of the local languages, don't have any skills, and then the government provides housing as much as they can, and they build new outlying home areas like this where there's good conditions and the kids can go to school and join the larger South African society. Well, when we're in Cape Town, if you go over the mountain to the airport into the northern suburbs, you pass one of the major universities of South Africa, and the main one that was founded by Cecil Rhodes. So he was the, let's say, the great imperialist who set up the railroads, started the diamond mines, and as Rob described, was sort of a key figure in all of the history of South Africa. And from the Cape all the way, hoping to having a train all the way into East Africa and all the way to Egypt. Well, it never quite happened that way because the continent is big and the funds were either squandered or it could never match Rhodes' ambition. And he had a very successful life, except that his legacy has been rather kicked around ever since. So Rudyard Kipling, on one of his monuments, had inscribed, "The immense and brooding spirit of Rhodes shall quicken and control. Living he was the land, and dead his soul shall be her soul." Well, this has been disputed by so many people that they demanded that Rhodes' statue and the university he founded, including his hall at Oxford, be taken down and not honored. And so his legacy is still there, but very much questioned. And he himself, as he was dying, he said, "So little done, so much to do." Well, near the university, there's a whole monument to him, but his actual grave is near Stellenbosch, one of his country estates. But in his wealth and magnanimousness, he donated a very large piece of garden, which is a remarkable site, to the Kirchenbosch World Heritage Site, where they feature the unique plant life of the Cape, West Cape area, particularly up in these mountains and particularly on Table Mountain and right in this area. So there are hundreds of endemic and unique plants to this region that Rhodes, as in his spare times, he he collected and he made his own private gardens, now turned into a public site. So you've already seen some of these tremendous flowers. There's some in the lobby here, and you see them ashore. The proteus is the kind of the iconic species of flowering plant, which only thrive in this kind of a climate, which is sort of Mediterranean, and it's in one way, and the other way it has different soil, so it's just to develop a different kind of plant life. Then as you go around outside of Cape Town, there are bays and points and beaches and communities, and so there's a highway that you can stretch around. It's unbelievably rugged, actually, because the mountains are so sweeping and the sea is so rough, and the communities have kind of clung on there, particularly around the beaches. So this is what you do when you have more time in Cape Town, is go have yet another holiday. I do recommend you could go over from the city to the left of the screen, come over to False Bay, where they've made marine preserves and swimming areas. And this is you take a taxi or a bus, even go to Muizenberg. And so I was there a number of years ago to go take my son to go surfing. Now this is a little Dutch farming town that happens to be on the beach, and now a lot of it is developed as, you know, resort housing and such, to go and be on this tremendously beautiful big bay with a very regular surf, and they have beach houses like this. And so this is one of the places out of town where locals go to enjoy. And it used to be for whites only. Now the whole world is there, and they have become a surf training center. So here's my son a few years ago, and the first time he'd ever surfed, so indulge me while I see how he did. Oh, yes, see, he's more daring than I. And of course, those are just small little training waves, not the really big stuff. And but that's the joy of the ocean, and that Polynesian sport has spread around the world. And he survived, but it's you know, to feel one with the ocean. That's the way to do it until you swim for your life. But anyway, this is one of the little towns, Simonstown, out around False Bay. So you get a real feeling of particularly the Afrikaan heritage and the housing. And then on the beach there, they have African penguins, also called jackass penguins. And so this is not what you see in Antarctica. And I'm surprised the penguins stay so well dressed, considering. But of course, you know, a casual penguin doesn't look good in a thong or bikini. And so I indulge me again, because these penguins are always charming. And so how do penguins like to drink? On the rocks. And how do penguins go online? With their web feet. Oh no. One last one. Why are there no penguins in the UK? Because penguins are terribly afraid of whales. Sorry, my Welsh heritage showing. Anyway, and there are other excursions, and on your own you can go out to these fantastic valleys. This is Stellenbosch, which is originally settled by French Huguenot refugees who set up vineyards, and so this is the heart of the wine district. And again, many a beautiful landscape in the town, and luncheon at vineyards is a common thing to do, and see some of the traditional Dutch architecture, and just have a day in the country. Now this is within an hour of where we are docking, so it's not a far distance. It's just so dramatic, and of course delicious. And then if you're really hungry, you can go join this lunch crowd, and they raise them for the meat and the feather, our ostrich friends. And so I once went to them, and they had the whole process laid out, and the ostriches were almost happy to see us. They're not a very let's say welcoming bird, because they'll peck at you, and then they occasionally do this. Now this is maybe mythology, but because it only rarely happens when a bird is scratching around and thinks that they're grubs and insects, so it'll actually dig with its beak underground. Don't try this at the La Terrazza. But there are other beautiful bays, and this is going out to Cape Point. So as I said, there are many points of land and headlands and these incredible cliffs, but this one is going out to the actual Cape Hope, and with a little oil rig on a trip around the point. I'm not sure why, because this is very rough seas. I was saying this is the last place on Earth where you'd want to have offshore drilling, but anyway, it's happening. But then you go out onto what's called the Campbell Road, and you can see it sort of etched in there to get out to the very edge of the Chapman's Drive, that's what it is, to the point. And so again, this is a longer trip out of the center city, but you drive through over the valleys and through, and then on the drive out to the point, which was manned as a lighthouse originally, and then the point identified as the tip of Cape Hope. So there is the lighthouse above and a little walkways and a reception center there. And you can go down and see the marker that is near the original Pedrada cross that was put there by Bartholomew Diaz in 1482. So this is the end of the world as far as we are, and it is particularly dramatic. It's a good thing to be a bird around here, I think, because you get better views than on the land, but here's the actual point of Cape Point. So I showed this before, the swirling seas and the rough waters, and the drama of South Africa is never ending. And so you can imagine how many first sailors and settlers, if not the people who lived here, were faced with this ocean that was always bountiful but also very angry. And some seals seem to be unfazed by that. So the crowning glory of Cape Town, though, is Table Mountain. And so if you haven't done it, there's a funicular cable car that comes up from the center down at the base of the mountain, not far from the downtown area. And then you ride up, and this house is the landing for the funicular, but the mountain itself is flat pretty much on the top. There are also walkways. You can, for about 3 hours, you can walk from downtown all the way to the top, but it's easier to take this, of course. And so then you have the above the cloud view of the town, which is quite fantastic. And they have, again, endemic plants, some of which only grow on the top of the mountain. These are lichens and succulents and different kinds of stubby trees, but you can take a kind of a botanical walk around the whole top of the island, rather the mountain of the Table Mountain. So again, I recommend doing this, so it would take half a day. And here's a version of the proteus flower that grows up there. And people go up there and hopefully watch out where they're going. Step back a bit. Oh, where'd they go? Oh, well. And that's what the view is from up there, though. So you really do feel like a peeping bird up there. And, have a view of this great city. And there again is the great stadium. And I wrote a little ode to Cape Town in South Africa, which I described that South Africa is a rugged and beautiful land that has been watered in blood and the tears of oppression, yet it is still beautiful, bountiful, forgiving, as human passions unleashed by the land and sea clash, though there was always enough for all. And somehow greed and righteousness have yielded the bastard of injustice. And somehow, as if in a patience beyond any person, peace has prevailed over history. And a lovely, fragile quilt of cultures is stitched together. An array of relief and good cheer has spread over the land which Mandela calmed. Life is still not fair, and troubles abound, yet the worst is past, and the best is becoming. And I'll leave you with one last phrase. You may have heard this before. I saw more than I remember, and I remember more than I saw. So I hope you appreciate your time in South Africa and the beauty of this land. And thank you very much for being aboard.